My cousin's known for not being a very good person. Well, he passed away, and I didn't go to his funeral because I found out a secret that, well, the rest of my family didn't believe. I told them something very important about his suspicious death, but I'm telling you, they overlooked it. Well, here's exactly what I found out. I've lived life as if it was a nightmare. My parents died in a horrible road accident, and I became an orphan with no family in just a day. After their death, I had no one, no real family members to look after me, and if there were some relatives, they refused to help me. It was only my mom's sister who was willing to let me stay with her. Although her husband, Matthew, was really against her decision and put a lot of effort to avoid me from staying with him. But she wanted to do it for her dead sister, and just because of my mom, she took me in. I had no attachment to her, I just knew she was my aunt. She was helping me out in some way. And though I was grateful to her for that, it was no better than an orphanage, however, since her husband actually hated my existence for some unknown reason. He was a sketchy man, with tons of bad habits, and let me tell you, he was an alcoholic and had a messed up head. He would yell at me, making the smallest mistakes, and punish me. Ground me in my room for days. But what enraged me the most was how completely different he was when it came to his own son. Talking about his son, his name James, and 2 years older than me he is. A total brat and spoiled kid with no academic or any other achievements to his name. All he did was hang out with his friends, party like crazy animals, and spend nights out doing God knows what. He wasn't exactly bad towards me, as he barely interacted with me. He would rarely talk to me, and it was always about how lucky I was to get my parents' money, without doing anything. And I tried my best to ignore his unaware self and his ignorant remarks. He acted as if it was a blessing to get my deceased parents saved up money, as if I haven't just lost all my family. James has always been a carefree person, and because of his habit of blurting out whatever comes into his mind without giving it a second thought, I've just always disliked him. Not only that, but whenever he gets in trouble, he would somehow just get away with it, and I would be the one to blame. His father always turned a blind eye to all the stuff that he did, and every single deed that I did, blind eye turned. The man could care less about his son's wrongdoings. He would always be too busy making my life a living hell. James had never really hurt me directly whatsoever, but I had faced a lot of bad situations all thanks to him. So, growing up in that house and then moving away when I got admission to a university, I hadn't had much contact with him and was too busy trying to make my own life better and face the real world. Talking about moving away, I always wanted to get away from them, live alone, and settle somewhere where I can live a relatively better and peaceful life. All because of my troubled childhood. If I recall how I loved it in that house, then it would be better to describe it as always walking on eggshells, as one mistake and I would be out of the house for good. At least that's what my aunt's husband Matthew would say. I didn't have anywhere to go. I wasn't an adult, so I did my best not to cause any trouble and get kicked out. I would live quietly in the house, following my aunt's every word and doing whatever she would say, going straight to school and coming back home on time. No friends, no hobbies, nothing but a boring, bland lifestyle. On the other hand, James had a lot of hobbies and nothing to do to kill time, as well as his parents' money. He would waste his parents' money and would not care any less about the consequences. He would go to clubs, get involved with the wrong type of people. I think that's where he got his habit of gambling. We had just started high school when he was doing all this stuff and getting mixed up with the wrong crowd. He would come home, demand money from his parents, cause a general ruckus, get the money, and leave, and the routine would just repeat itself. My aunt was tired of his pathetic behavior, but her alcoholic husband would do everything in his hand to support his child. All because if James would win money from gambling, he would throw a lot at him too. Anyways, this disturbing lifestyle of ours, it continued for years, and all that time I had no relation to whatever they would do. I would work part-time jobs just to make money for myself. I was fully supporting myself financially, and would not take a penny from them. Not like they would give me any in the first place, but I knew my parents left me money. But I could not get a hold of it until I was 18, and when I was able to get it, I decided to keep saving more so that I would be able to move out of the house ASAP. James was becoming more and more troubled and rebellious as time passed by. He had a weird company of friends, and the people he would mingle with were even weirder. My aunt was certainly worried about him, but he was anywhere near controllable or easy to deal with, so she was a helpless person in this matter. I had also started maintaining my distance from him just to avoid getting into any trouble. So, the time period I spent there was quiet and away from his negative influence. I kept moving forward, and he just kept ruining things for himself. So, it took me a few years to collect the money to be able to get admission to a good university and finally move out. My aunt's husband had demanded money from me for keeping me in his house for years, and even though my aunt tried to stop me, I decided to shut his mouth and pay him, the filthy rat. I didn't want to hear him brag about raising me selflessly whatsoever. So, I moved away. I bought an apartment near my university. Cash. I was still doing a part-time job and trying to live a good life. I wasn't in contact with anyone except my aunt, whom I would sometimes call and ask about her health, which seemed to be deteriorating slowly. All thanks to the tensions her son would give her. Nothing but stress. I would still hear about my cousin causing chaos in her life, but I had no way to stop him, and I didn't even want to meddle in their life anymore. Nevertheless, life continued, and a few months later, I saw my cousin hanging out with some guys who looked like nothing but gangsters. I had seen him near my workplace at a bar. To be precise, outside a bar, and James was totally unaware of my presence and didn't know I saw him. I had nothing to say to him, so I just pretended not to see him at all. Though it gave me a vivid idea of what kind of life he was living now, or trying to live, but it did not concern me at all. I just continued living my peaceful life and would occasionally see him with his mobster gang gambling. Things continued to be like that for a while until one day, he called me. Well, I was confused as heck. Had no idea about the reason behind his call, so when I picked it up and he demanded money from me, oh boy, I was upset. I straightforwardly rejected his request and refused to give him my hard-earned cash. He tried to persuade me a lot, but I was adamant about not giving him a darn penny. He tried to come up with tons of excuses to get some money out of me, but I knew better than anyone to not fall for his dirty little schemes. I'd seen him with his gambling gang quite a lot, and spotted them near a casino too. I stayed determined and did not let my words falter and just continued to refuse his request no matter how many times he called. He kept bothering for more than 2 weeks before finally giving up. Just when I thought my life was finally going to be alright and possibly free of drama, I received the biggest shock of my life. I had never expected to hear those words of such kind of news, and I was left stunned and devastated when I heard it. I couldn't believe my ears, and for a moment thought it was some kind of joke. So, what happened? I'd stopped getting calls from James bothering me to give him some money. Although I was happy about it, there was also some confusion at the back of my mind about why he would give up my money so easily. One thing he had always cared about all his life is money, and him not having it and causing no drama about it wasn't something that I would consider possible. So, letting my curiosity pique, I called my aunt and inquired about his whereabouts. My aunt was stupefied by my call and had never expected me to call her to ask about James. Well, it was a shock for me too. Anyways, she told me how he recently came home and caused a bit of trouble and left after having the little money that she had saved up given to him. She had no idea what he needed money for so badly, but she had to give it to him eventually. She kept going on about how many times he's done the same. I had nothing to say about the whole situation. It just gave me a headache to listen to her rambling, when they were the ones who let him do this, all that, and never stopped him when they should have and could have. After that, I didn't call her and got busy with my own life again. Time passed. About a month, maybe two later, I received the call, the very unexpected one I was talking about. My aunt, she was crying and yelling. James passed away in a deadly accident. Oh, I couldn't believe my ears. She told me the accident was so deadly that the car was destroyed and then blew up, leaving only ashes. No body was ever found. The situation sounded too dangerous to me, although it also made me think. How were they so sure if it was James? And then I asked her that. She told me that a mobile phone was found at the accident scene and it belonged to James. Well, I still couldn't believe the situation at all. I received more calls from my relatives, and it still felt like an impossible situation I couldn't wrap my head around. They told me that because of some relatives living far away, the funeral was arranged after just 2 days. It was enough time for me to wrap up my project and ask for a leave from my professors. My mind was a bit hazy, and I couldn't really focus on much. It was certainly shocking that the guy I've lived with for years and I saw just a few days ago is dead. I hurriedly wrapped up things and booked a one-way ticket to my hometown. I had to pay a visit to my boss to ask for a leave. It was in the evening, after my classes ended, and I talked things out with my professors, and I was going to see my boss, that I saw the impossible. I was near the restaurant that I worked at when I heard a bunch of loud voices and a bunch of guys yelling, cursing, and playing about. My feet stopped moving when I heard a very, very familiar face. I snapped my head towards the direction and my eyes widened, seeing James standing there, alone. Well, not alone, along with a very familiar group of people, the same posse I've seen him with before. I couldn't believe my eyes as I watched him laugh and then enter the same club I'd seen him at before the disappearance. I stayed frozen in my place. It took me some time to contemplate what I just witnessed. James was alive? How was this even possible? My brain had almost stopped working when my phone starts to ring and I saw it was my aunt. So I answered. She inquired about my arrival time, telling me that she needs to be there soon. Well, I took a deep breath and blurted out the words which shook her to the core. I told her I just saw James just a moment ago. And before I could say anything else, the phone was snatched from her, and Matthew got on the phone. The man starts cursing at me for disturbing the woman and adding fuel to the fire. Well, I didn't know how to make them believe that I just saw this for real, because I was certain that it was James that I saw, and in the end, I decided to not go to the funeral of a person who is alive. But this caused a rift in the family. I was getting negative reactions for almost every relative. Only a few let me say what I wanted to and sympathize with me, but they all thought that I was probably mistaking somebody else for James. I was equally shocked by his death, so I was saying things that sounded crazy. But I knew that I wasn't lying, and what I was telling was the absolute truth. So when I didn't go to the funeral, a lot of drama happened, and there probably wasn't anyone who hadn't considered me, well, an a-hole for doing all that. But I knew what I was going to do, and that was to bring what was behind the veil to the front and expose the truth to everybody, so that's exactly what I decided to do. Although it brought a lot of trouble for me, I was persistent to finally let everyone know what kind of life I've lived, and what kind of person Matthew had brought up. Not only that, but I also wanted to find out what actually happened, what he did, why he faked his death. There were tons of questions I knew I had to answer, and well, bring everybody to light. I'll update you whenever I learn something new. Update number 1. And that's what I did. After I refused to attend the funeral, everyone loathed me and hated me. My relatives called me all sorts of things, from calling me a selfish person for not attending the funeral of my cousin, whose family took care of me in the hardest time, to a heartless jerk. I decided not to care about what they all said about me. I had only one mission in my mind, and that was to expose James. So, when they all cornered me and cut me off, I just stayed quiet. I knew it was of no use to talk to them and settle things with them. They were never going to believe it unless I proved it to them. And honestly, at first, I had no idea what to do or not. But then a thought crossed my mind, and that was to go look for him again. And I decided to do so the very next day I went to the club, where I had seen him, but when I asked around about him, nobody seemed to know. I wasn't expecting them to know about him anyways. I mean, it's not like he was some big shot to be remembered by the workers. It's just a normal guy like me. So my attempt to gather any information about him from the club failed almost miserably. So I started to think about any other way to get any kind of information regarding him, since I had also started doubting myself if I'd really seen him or not, or if I was just deceived and it was somebody else. I wasn't sure anymore. So a few days passed and I started to question myself more and more. But to my luck, I was working one day and I saw him again. He was with the same friends. I didn't go near him, but I followed him this time. I saw him go to a nearby casino as usual, so I went there too. I saw him playing cards and gambling. I wasn't surprised at all seeing him act like that. Anyways, I got caught off guard when he suddenly punched by a scary-looking guy when he lost his game. I didn't know what to do and watched them fight like crazy animals. It seemed like James was used to getting beaten, since he left the casino after the man left too. I was still there and decided to ask around about him. What I got to know was he was definitely addicted to gambling, and he'd lost quite a bit and quite a lot of games. Hasn't paid money to most of the men here, and he wasn't only indebted to them, but I heard about him being chased by dangerous men in his, or should I say, old town too. And that's why he left the area and came here. After gathering this information, I just connected the dots, and was sure he faked his death to get away from them and save himself. But to be honest, him running away doesn't really mean that they would leave him alone. I was sure about that. Anyways, I totally understood why he did it, all of the drama. But it's not possible for him to do this all alone. Faking your death and all that, things aren't easy for anyone to do something like that. He must be friends with some wrong kind of powerful people for him to be able to do all that without getting caught. Now that I was pondering, was if I should get involved with it or not. Not because I've chickened out or anything, but because I should warn him and let him rectify it himself. Or would he not even care about all this? I knew the latter seemed like what he would do, but still, I decided to give it a chance. Update number 2. So, after finding out that my cousin had actually pretended to be dead and planned all the drama to get away from the people to whom he owed money, I decided to let him know that I was aware of all that and gave him a very last warning. I knew James had thrown away his phone at the site of the incident and must be using a new phone or probably a new identity too. So the only way to contact him was to meet him face to face. But unfortunately, for days, whenever I went to work and waited for him in my breaks, and even after work to show up. Well, he never did. I had started to think he might have seen me here too, but then I was proven wrong when one day, late evening, he showed up, alone. If that wasn't strange enough, his face had bruises and he seemed like he got a good old beating. I felt a little hesitant to approach him, but then I decided, screw it, I'm gonna do it. I walked up to him. He was busy on the phone, probably waiting for one of his punk friends. Anyways, reaching up to him, I called out his name, and his eyes widened as saucers when he heard my voice. I watch him go pale as a ghost, as if he saw a ghost himself, although shouldn't it have been my reaction? How ironic. He soon got a hold of his nerves and tried to act like he didn't know me. I was getting tired of his little drama, so decided to say whatever I had on my mind. I didn't tell him to quit acting. Rather, I told him about what I was thinking of doing after he pulled this little crap prank on his old parents, and how I've been observing him for days. Well, he seemed to be really nervous at this point, hearing that, as he pulled me aside and told me not to meddle with himself. Do not get involved. I couldn't help but laugh at his stupidity. Why does he think I would hide the truth when I'm the one getting blamed for everything, though he was the one who deceived everybody? But James, old James, he acted so stubborn. And he told me no matter what, he wasn't going to apologize, and let even his parents know it was all a show he put on, just to get away from those people. At this point, James got furious after listening to my rambling rant, and at that point he tried to threaten me, which just made me mad. I knew I was going to teach him a good lesson. I wasn't going to be the scapegoat and let everybody else gang up against me for not attending the funeral of a person who's not even dead, and is just pretending to do all that just for his own sake. After that meeting with him, I decided to pay my aunt a visit, and that was the very first step to unveiling the truth. And I was determined to do it no matter the cost, under any circumstance. Update number 3. The pleasant meeting. Yeah, well, just kidding. After the unpleasant meeting with James, I waited for a few days to clear my schedule and go visit my aunt. Although I wasn't really sure if she was going to believe me or not, since the last time Matthew got all hyper and didn't let us talk at all. Besides, talking about it to her who considers her son actually dead was indeed like scratching her wounds. So, after mentally preparing myself for all kinds of reactions I might face, I went to her house. To my bad luck, Matthew opened the door and I was met with his angry eyes and boring holes in my face. I was ready for him to throw a punch at me and probably break my nose or something, but before all that could happen, my Aunt Amanda spotted me in the doorway and pushed him aside, embracing me and started crying. It took me some minutes to calm her down. All the time, Matthew was sitting on the couch, eyes red with anger, absolutely furious as he stared at me. I knew it was no use to talk to him about anything, so I waited for him to go out before finally letting my aunt know about whatever happened. When he went out to smoke, I wasted no breath and told my aunt about seeing James and the ugly encounter that we had. At first, she was quiet for some painfully long time, but eventually nodded and started telling me how she had felt like something was off. She told me about the men he used to gamble with, showing up at her house and demanding money from them. She said they all were also saying how her son ran away, and after hearing what I said, she was sure it must be the truth. I could see how sad she was feeling after all that. So I then started telling her how I got to know about his AIMS and why he did all that drama, and when she heard about him not giving a darn if they had to face all the trouble, she told me that she never expected such a thing from him and doesn't know why her own son is behaving like that. Her ignorance was enough for me to open my lips and just blurt everything about his past doings, and how her husband's behavior just gave him so much leverage. After that meeting with her, I went back to my city. It was only a few days later that she told me how these men are making her life absolute hell, and she wants me to help her. Of course, I agreed. I wanted to pay her back for whatever she did for me. So I started gathering information about James and piling it up to make sure I don't leave behind any receipts, and I show everyone each and every ugly act he's done. Update number 4. Final update posted by OP. After I had decided to collect things that could prove him to be a liar and uncover the truth, I had to actually do a lot to make it come true. It wasn't easy for me to go around asking for him and about his acts, and it was surely not easy. No one knew him, and those who did just didn't want to tell me anything. Especially the people at the club where he was a regular at. They weren't really helpful as they refused to give out any information regarding anyone. So I tried a lot just to make them cooperate, but it was getting difficult and there's no progress to be told. One day, James decides to call me again, threatening me to stay away from the matter, but I ignored it. I noticed how the very next day he showed up outside my workplace. Well, he had his friends with him. I had to warn him about calling the police to make him leave, and I soon realized that working by myself was not going to work out. So, an idea popped up in my head, and I went back to my home. My aunt told me those men still visit and they're very scary. I waited for them to show up myself, and when they finally did, I couldn't be happier about the golden opportunity I finally got presented to me on a silver platter. I asked them to hear me out, which they agreed to after my consistent pleadings. I tell them about the entire situation. I tell them about James hiding out. It was quiet after that, and just when I thought they were not going to do anything, I saw James being dragged home all beaten up. I paid for his debt. Just because of my aunt, they finally left him alone. But this wasn't sure the end I wanted. I had to make it clear to my aunt what I needed. She had agreed, so the next day, I remember seeing all my relatives gathered at their house. When James, his truth was exposed, everybody was appalled by the new discovery, and I not only exposed him, but how Matthew refused to believe me. Everyone was horrified by the shocking revelations. Nobody had ever expected such a thing from him, especially when they always made me look like the bad guy and covered up all his wrongdoings. After making sure everyone knew what happened, I was happy to leave the house and never come back. All his life, James had not been held responsible for anything he's done, and I was joyful that I was the one, me, who they are indebted to, and felt grateful for saving them, not the other way around. Though I knew it was not like James would ever change his disposition miraculously, at least everyone would know now what to expect. I just wasn't alienated by my relatives based on the false pretense of others, and those who are actually troubled are held accountable. After that, James did get involved with bad people again, but it wasn't my concern anymore. I cleared my name. My aunt respected my decision and did not blame me for starting my own new life, where I could stay away from her toxic husband and her son who's nothing but bad news. So it just seems to me like OP's uncle, Matthew, was the worst person of this story because he was enabling all of the bad behavior that was happening. But I do want to hear from you guys. What do you think of this story, and what would you have done if you were in OP's position and you swear that you saw him alive gambling and the rest of your family just didn't believe you? But then ultimately, karma did come back to strike. Guys, drop your opinions down in the comment section, and if you're new to the channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button just for daily videos, and I do have other channels as well you can find in the description below. Alright guys, have a fantastic day. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.